A couple of years back, I lived for about a year and a half in Moscow. I mostly madly loved that city. I was studying Russian and naturally I fell in with a group of my fellow English Russian students and expats. It didn't do my liver any favors since we went out and sampled the chaotic nightlife at least once a week, often more often. I'm not a massive party animal and I can't stomach going home in the wee hours of the morning all the time, so often I'd catch the last train home rather than go to clubs and stay out till 5. A few quick facts for those not familiar with Moscow. 1. There are very strange people in that city sometimes. Man, I really love that place, but there are some proper oddballs. 2. The last metro train runs at about 1:30 a.m. I think. Unless you catch that, you've either got to try your luck with taxis or walk or wait until the morning trains and get in with the commuters. I'm a cheapskate and getting the metro was always easier and cheaper. 3. Moscow Metro is legendarily complicated and weirdly organized and intimidating. It's also very kind of creepy at 1 a.m. when, for a bustling metropolis outside the city center, there aren't many people hanging around in the station. Those big, grand Stalinist halls, totally devoid of anyone else. Bloody freaky. Like the setting of some weird dystopian futuristic zombie thing or something. Always gave me the heebie-jeebies. I should also add that for some strange reason, the men there seemed to think I was a member of the sex industry often. This was mainly a problem in the winter months because maybe the women don't risk the minus temperatures at 2 a.m. Just kidding. Maybe just because, I don't know, I spent most of the time dressed like Scott of the Antarctic and trying not to faceplant on black ice, none of which screams prostitute to most people, but... So onto the weirdo. I'd been out to the bars with my friends, and since I had planned a big sightseeing day the next day, I bailed on going to the clubs and headed home. I had a few friends who lived on the same line, but this night they were all going on a proper night out, so I thought, screw it, and braved a boring metro ride home alone. Going home started happily, merrily, drunkenly hopped onto a train, and it was quiet, but not too quiet. A couple of merrymakers out and about, but I got a seat with loads of space in a relatively quiet car, and I kind of zoned out for a few moments. Our antagonist got on at the next stop. He was a very big man, heavy set, but also generally huge, and he stood near the doors. I don't know why I just kind of ended up spacing out in his direction. I was drunk, alright, but I did end up staring a little bit, not paying attention, just waiting for my stop. Gradually, though, I noticed he had this pool of pinkish, reddish, watery stuff collecting in drips around his feet. Like, you know, the stuff you get in a packet of meat. My brain processed this as blood at first, so I stared like an idiot, wondering if this man was injured or something. When I looked up, I made embarrassing eye contact and realized 2 things. The liquid was leaking from his shitty battered-looking backpack he was carrying. Seriously, who carries leaking meat in a backpack? And he was also staring at me. I looked away. He came to sit in the opposite seat from me, still staring. I only had to wait one stop for the station I had to change lines at, but it was the most damn uncomfortable wait I've had for a long time. He stared at me the whole time with something my brain can't decide was a weird rape or assault face or a want to hurt you face, since I was too scared to properly look at him. My station came. I got off the train. Meat Man followed, which I shrugged off. Maybe he lives at this stop, I said to myself. To be sure he wasn't following me because he made me massively uncomfortable, I took a very counterintuitive and convoluted path to the platform I needed to catch the last train from, even at the risk of missing it. Fortunately, this station was quite busy and full of guards for some reason, or I might have freaked out a bit here and then. I genuinely took the most stupid time-consuming trip of the platform I could think of. I looked over my shoulder a lot. I kid you not, he followed me every step of the way, step after leaking step. I tried everything to shake this man. When my train arrived, I got into one car, dived off, and ran into another, running like a lunatic to avoid missing it. He somehow followed me. I pretended to not get off at the next stop, the station before my station. He started to follow but didn't buy it. All I could think of is, wow, I'm going to be killed by the Russian equivalent of the midnight meat train man. This can't be happening. I purposely avoided even looking at him. I didn't want to miss my stop, so I jumped off the train like a crazy person. Again, luck was not on my side because that jerk must have the reflexes of a cat. My station was one of the ones that was genuinely really quiet, like a freaking tomb, and it creeped me out the best of times. To make it worse, the easiest way home was through one of those convoluted Moscow metro overpasses. I decided to do the stupid thing and ignore this man, just go about my business and hope he went away. Halfway through the underpass, this man was still following me with his drippy bag and his crazed, unfocused eyes and his weird rape murder face. And Dutch courage kicked in. I was pretty spooked out by this man, but I was also really upset and angry. Suddenly, like really mad. What I did next was stupid, but it is a lighthearted end to the story of the scary Moscow Metro Man. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. It probably won't work most of the time. I wouldn't try it on anyone or anything else. For example, bears. Yeah, so please don't try this on bears. I was also really drunk, which is probably why I thought screw it and decided to do it. Aware that this man was still following me and closing in and genuinely being very stalky now, I turned around and shouted, "If you don't leave me alone, I will murder you," and other things to that extent in a drunken mix of Russian and English. I kind of had a very special kind of alcohol and fear-fueled temper tantrum, which involved jumping and feeling like a crazy person, swearing and throwing my shoes at it. You know, out crazy the crazy. Eventually, I managed to get him to piss off enough to make a getaway and put enough distance between us that I managed to lose him. Worth looking like an idiot for, I reckon. I don't know why he was following me or what was in that damn bag, that leaking stuff, or why he looked so mad. He might have been drunk, maybe, and I know my imagination takes me down a dark route when I think about it. Maybe I was lucky to not be found face down in a ditch or something. Maybe he had truly horrible plans and I made it too much hassle to be worth the payoff. Maybe there was something properly nasty in that minky looking backpack. I'll never know and I don't want to. On the other hand, he was scared off by a drunken woman waving her arms like a helicopter, shouting threats and throwing her shoes around, so maybe he was just, I don't know, mildly creepy and not much of a threat at all. Again, I'll never know. But that's the story of the Moscow Meat Man. Hope it wasn't too long. I'd like to share with you a series of horrific events from my childhood that we never had a real resolution to. There were some suspects, but nobody was ever brought to justice. Also, there has been a lot of terrible things happen on my mom's property, and that's another story, but here's part of the beginning. This part of the story happened roughly around 1990 during my summer break from school, but continued on for quite some time. I must have been about 2nd or 3rd grade age, and I grew up with just my mom, because my dad was never in the picture, so we lived alone until I was about 12, when she remarried. Our secluded country neighborhood was safe for the most part, and all of our immediate neighbors were elderly, save for one couple who had a few young adult sons around my brother's age. For the most part, though, there wasn't much riffraff in the area. At first, there were only minor clues to indicate something was going on, such as things being moved in the backyard, and I guess because my mother was always being paranoid, and definitely a conspiracy theorist, she always had an idea that something was happening. I didn't really know this until I heard her talking about it much later after the events. She tried to hide things so they wouldn't scare me. She even started sleeping in my room with me at night, probably because she was paranoid, but I assumed it was because we could stay up late and watch movies together and eat snacks. One morning after I got up, I noticed that our old wooden back door had huge chunks missing out of it around the part where the lock/bolt goes into the door frame. It was as if somebody were trying to chip away at the locked part. I showed Mom what I had discovered, not realizing why the door was damaged, and she went completely silent, pale-faced and panicked. I could tell something was wrong, but I was too young to understand that somebody had apparently tried to break in, either in the night or when we were out. That day, she mended the door to the best of her ability, and if I remember correctly, she even put a new lock on it from the hardware store. She also filed a police report, but there was nothing they could do. I had a German Shepherd named Munchie. He was a big, spoiled baby who loved raiding the fridge with me, but to a stranger, he was probably very intimidating. He was also my best friend and very watchful over me, and I miss him to this day. For a week or two, after Mom and I would go to bed, Munchie would start pacing and whining and acting very anxious. Since we lived in such a rural place with no imminent danger, we thought, Mom would frequently let him outside by himself, so one night when he was acting exceptionally strange, she let him outside alone. We didn't have central air because our house was old, built in the 50s. We were very poor and Kentucky summers weren't really too hot anyways. At night, Mom would open all the windows in the house, with the halfway burglar latch of course. Since she was in my room with me watching a movie, we had both my bedroom windows all the way open. My back window overlooked a bit of a hill which gradually sloped into a low, wide bottom. The bottom was full of tall weeds and bushes. Suddenly, we heard movement in the brush of the bottom. Munchie. Then we heard him snarling like a werewolf. Mom got up and ran to the window but couldn't see anything. What we heard next was horrifying. It sounded as if Munchie was attacking someone. He was making those awful noises as if he were eating somebody alive. I began to cry, terrified that something would happen to my best friend, and my mom started screaming in horror for Munchie to come home. We heard what sounded like somebody escaping my dog's wrath and taking off through the brush. Mom ran to the back door with me right behind her and called for Munchie at the top of her lungs, until he came running back into the house. He was panting and grunting and bristled up. I hugged him so tight, I probably nearly squeezed the life out of him. As time progressed, things got worse. Being so young, I didn't know for a long time, but my mom was safeguarding the house. She even moved a full tall dresser in front of my window that overlooked the hill in the bottom. She tried her best, but whoever was harassing us was finding new ways to make our life miserable, or maybe try to kill us. One night, she said that she heard peculiar noises coming from the backyard. I don't necessarily remember this, so I called her for details before writing this. Sounds were coming from under the dining room windows, which overlooked the backyard. She turned on the security light on the back of the house and saw a ladder propped up against the back of our house, as if somebody were trying to climb through our windows. This incident seemed more like an empty threat than a real attempt, especially considering the back door was probably easier access. We don't know if the person thought the windows would be unlocked or what, but for whatever reason, they gave it a try. Again, she called our local police and they did nothing. I should probably note that we didn't really have much law enforcement there. You probably wouldn't believe me if I tried to tell you how worthless law enforcement was, and still is in that area. On another occasion, and this memory is burned into my brain because it scared me so bad, somebody snuck up to my bedroom window one night. I hate to even think what their intentions might have been. Mom had drifted off to sleep, but I was quietly watching the rest of Willy Wonka. I was looking in the direction of my ominous window, the one overlooking the bottom, so I ended up getting a good look at this big white hand which reached up and slapped my window screen multiple times in rapid succession. I screamed. Mom woke up and the tormentor took off, no doubt through the brushy bottom. My mom is a dog person. She adores dogs and always had lots of dogs and puppies around. We had 7 little black pups and the mother dog around this time, and they lived outside on our huge property, had plenty of space to play, and had a very nice big doghouse. At some point around the same time this stuff was happening, we had to be out of town for a few days. Mom had some people watching the house, and I guess she didn't really think anything horrendous could happen. Then again, she wasn't aware of how far this would go. When we came home, Mom's puppies had been killed and lined up in a row in the side yard, close to my window that overlooked the bottom. This was obviously absolutely devastating. The police did little to help, which included telling her how short to saw off her shotgun so that I was still legal and advising us to keep Munchie in the house. I forgot to ask, but I'm nearly positive that my mom ended up sending the mommy dog away to my sister's house on the other side of town. Months later, incidents were increasing in occurrence, and then somebody decided to take it way too far. Something hitting the back of the house in the wee hours of the morning. Mom looked out the windows and saw nothing, at least not until the next morning. She found a stick with a charred pine knot on it. Somebody had apparently lit it on fire and threw it at our house. I assumed they were hoping our house would burn. And don't even ask about the cops because they did nothing yet again. I wouldn't be surprised if they knew who the culprit was and just didn't care. Then one day, Munchie went missing. He had gone out to the bathroom in the evening before bed, but he didn't come back immediately like always. He vanished. I don't even want to go into detail about this because it breaks my heart all over again, but we found him days later. He had been poisoned. To be completely honest, I could keep going with this story. Although it takes a lot of unbelievable turns, not all of them are horrifying. Some are just ridiculous. Then around 2009, a multiple-year-long court case began where my mom had to fight a group of her neighbors in court to keep them from stealing her property. Those events led to us believing that the people involved with that case may have had something to do with the torment we experienced all those years ago, but really all we can do is assume. So, tormentor, I wish we could meet, but you are a coward who harasses women and children and hurts animals. My cousin lived with me and my husband for about 3 or 4 months while she was looking for a new place, as she and her boyfriend recently split up. Tina was very helpful, and there would be a number of times that I'd come home from work and see that she's already making dinner for all of us, has cleaned the kitchen, or has ironed. She started seeing this guy called Mark, and I personally didn't like him and thought she could do better, but my husband convinced me into giving him a chance. Tina would text us and ask if it's okay if Mark could come over and stay, or if Mark could come to dinner. And I had to fight back the urge to say no, but I said our house is now her house, so she is welcome anytime. Each time I met him, I knew something wasn't right with him, and I couldn't put my finger on it, but I always had some creepy vibe. He always seemed to stare too much or would try and come up with weird topics to talk about over dinner. While I'm eating, I'd rather not talk about how much bleach it would take to kill someone. As I said, very weird things. Small items started going missing, and it was small things. Like some buttons came off my husband's jacket, so I got some new ones that matched the others the best I could and placed them on the side. I came home and they were nowhere to be seen, and the household said they didn't pick them up. My husband even joked around that the borrowers have it again. On payday, I decided to go and get some new clothes from a shop here, as I didn't want to spend that much. I usually grab some funny underwear, by the way, and by funny, I mean underwear with Family Guy or the Cookie Monster on them, and try and find some matching bras to go with it. I grabbed what I wanted, and putting everything away, I started dinner. A few weeks went by and I was just getting changed, and I opened my drawer and my Cookie Monster bra was there. I suddenly remembered that I have matching underwear, and I'm laughing to myself, wondering what my husband will say when he finds out that I've got Cookie Monster underwear. I honestly couldn't find my stuff anywhere. I tipped my drawer out and went through it all, and I couldn't find them still. I obviously did buy them, as I had the bras proof. I even looked in the bag in case I somehow left them in there. Feeling a bit let down and confused, I got dressed and carried on with my day. Fast forward a few more weeks, and my husband had my car for the day, as he had a meeting a few hours away. I walked to work, and I was on my way walking back from work when I heard a beep and a car pull up. Looking inside, I see Mark. "Hey, need a ride?" Yes please. Thank you very much." I get in the car and casually throw my work bag in the back seat and just turn around to say thank you again to Mark. And I said thankfully he showed up, as I didn't think I could handle walking back to work. Trying to make a joke of the situation. He drops me off at my house, and I pull the seat forward and grab my bag while he gets out, as my cousin is at home. I'm grabbing my bag, and some deodorant has fallen out, and some cookies I was saving in my bag are now in the footwell. I reach my bag under and wait to grab my things when I grab a small plastic bag. Looking inside, I see my Cookie Monster underwear, the missing buttons, a photo of me and my husband, and a used toothbrush of mine that I had to replace, and even a small collection of my false nails I was wearing once. I ended up pulling them all off, as I couldn't find the missing ones to replace the ones that had fallen off. Mark, why is my stuff in your car?" Right as I said that, I stepped slowly backwards from the car and reached for my phone to call my husband. Mark straight away jumps in his car, and we haven't seen him since. I told my cousin about it, and she said that he always used to go to the toilet for ages, and they joked all of the time about him having a water infection or that he didn't like her cooking. I walked into the bathroom at my community college, and there was another guy in there, and he was at one of the 2 urinals. I walk in and step up to the other urinal, and from the moment I walked in to the moment I unzipped my pants, this guy was staring directly at me. In my head I thought, maybe this guy's on the spectrum or something, because our college has a lot of students that are special needs and is a great place for them to get a degree and has really good programs to work with them. So it felt off, but I thought maybe it's nothing. I only wished that this was where the interaction ended. He finished before me and went over to wash his hands. I was just waiting for him to finish up and leave the bathroom because it felt really weird. While I'm still at the urinal and this guy is washing his hands, he looks at me and says, "You're a complete stranger, so you won't judge me. Is it wrong of me to take out my anger on people I don't know?" My first thought was, this guy isn't right, but I should probably listen. But I answered and said, "No, that's not right. That isn't healthy for you or the other person." He answers, "That's the conclusion I've come to as well. Thanks." And then he turns and walks out of the bathroom without even drying his hands. I don't know about that guy. I have a bad feeling about him. I don't know what to do about this situation. So, bathroom guy, I hope you get the help you need, but let's never meet again. Edit. From all the replies, it seems most people are just as confused as I was. Some say this guy could have been dangerous or unstable. That was kind of the vibe I initially had. Some say that this could have been a question that somebody with a mental illness would ask, not aware of social norms and with no ill intent. That could very well have been it too. Personally, I hope it was the latter, and I hope I don't see him on the news for doing something horrible one day. This encounter was not too long ago and solidified in my mind why I will always close the blinds at night and why even in a quiet suburban neighborhood, you should always lock your door. I've been reading creepy stories online since I was probably 12, when I first discovered Tumblr and Reddit, Creepypasta, No Sleep, and of course, Let's Not Meet. So, I have long since taken to checking to all windows and locks before I go to bed, and closing blinds and curtains for fear that I might look out to see some creep in a clown costume with a knife in my garden, or a person with their head at an unnatural angle. I always sort of wished I had a creepy encounter so I could write about it, but if I never have another experience like this for the rest of my life, it will be too soon. So, context. This nice suburban neighborhood, as I say, is the home of my parents. A little town in Cheshire, England, a quiet street where we all knew each other. Low crime rate except for one house, which has been broken into and robbed twice in about 10 years. Both opportunistic. Once because the keys were near the door and the invader smashed a small pane to reach them and let themselves in. The other time, they left their blinds open overnight, leaving their laptops, wallets, and both car keys on full display. Anyways, I don't live with my parents anymore, but I was back in town and staying with them for a few days over summer. I was sitting in the kitchen, which faces onto the street, and working on my laptop, just glancing up occasionally to watch people pass by walking dogs or strolling with the pram. I'd seen something moving in my periphery, so, like every time, I looked up hoping to see a dog walker or one neighbor and her newborn grandson. Nope, 2 people. A man in a semi-casual suit and a woman in plain jeans and a blouse. But they were moving weirdly. The woman had her head craned over to one of her shoulders and her arm on that side was bent backwards and unnaturally upwards with her hand rhythmically flicking. Her other arm randomly but smoothly glided about, guided by her elbow. It was a bit like when you try and push 2 magnets together at the same point of polarity. That's how I would describe it. I have friends with epilepsy and I have never seen them contort or flick like that. Not even their myoclonic jerks. The man looked more like one of those dancing inflatables you see at a used car dealership. That's the only way I could describe his movements. They walked past my parents' house and I instinctively called to my cat to check he wasn't outside with those weirdos. Found him upstairs in my old room. He was looking out the window, and as I followed his gaze, I saw 2 of the kid neighbors in that house that had been robbed multiple times waving across to me. Well, to my cat, but I waved back. All the same, from their parents' upstairs bedroom window. I went downstairs to tell my parents about the strange moving people, and my dad just furrowed his brow, asked if they were gone, and said to double check that the door was locked. I headed back to the kitchen to check if our back door was locked. This door doesn't have any windows in it, so you can understand I jumped out of my skin when, as I put my hand on the door handle, it was pushed down by somebody on the other side. I pushed the door immediately, before anybody could push it from outside. I also must scream because I hear my dad call back. I hear his footsteps coming through the house and then I hear a loud gasp on the other side of the door and out of the kitchen window. Guess who I see making a threat? Creepy moving dude and dudette. By the time my dad made it through the house, they're gone. He doesn't seem to believe me, although he also doesn't seem to doubt either. He's never seen them before and takes a free pop at me for being discriminatory against potential house guests with movement disorders. We make jokes like this because I had a movement disorder as a kid, and one time a parent wouldn't let me into her son's birthday party because they would be playing Simon Says and I made it difficult for the other kids. I digress. Anyways, these people were gone. I don't sleep well, due to that movement disorder actually. And those scary stories I read meant that I always listened to the excessive creaking in this house and noises on the street outdoors at night, like people walking home drunk and foxes mating. Most of the sounds are quiet though, so imagine my shock when my straining ears are suddenly attacked by a child's scream. It takes me a second to locate the sound and another to lurch from my bed to the window, looking straight over to the upstairs window, the same one where not 12 hours ago my neighbor's children were waving to me from. I scanned down the house and saw their front door wide open. I shouted for my parents, hoping to wake them up as I flew down the stairs in my PJs, with 999 already dialed on my phone to report this likely home invasion before I do anything else. I'm remembering to scream fire, not burglar, as I stride across the road, attempting to wake up other neighbors and gather support. There are 2 kids and a teenager in that commonly broken into house, kids who I babysat for 10 years, and one of them just screamed at 2 a.m. when their front door was wide open. I make sure I say this out loud to the emergency responder on the phone. As I near the door, I can see a figure inside moving frantically. So after telling the phone responder what is happening and answering their brief questions, I shout into the door from a safe distance, some phrases the police gave me to say. The police are on their way. We are right outside and we're getting help. Is anybody hurt? And to tell the intruders, we know you are there. Please do not hurt anyone. The police can help you. I get a response from the upstairs window and step back into the road to see a mother holding all 3 kids in her arms, and she tells me the middle child, who's 9, found intruders on the stairs when she went to get a drink in the night. The girl, Imogen, tells me they're like clowns. Clowns. This extra detail is the straw that broke the camel's back, and my vision darkens. Shit, I'm going to pass out. The last thing I hear is Emmy telling her mom I said a bad word. I came to in the middle of the road with a foil blanket on and a soft Octonauts toy under my head. I could see lots of blue lights, 3 police cars and an ambulance. That's one for me, and I can see my neighbors out of the corner of my eye. My hearing returns as Emmy tells me her little brother volunteered his toy because I hit my head when I fainted. Suddenly, I'm up and looking around to count all 5 of the family members and checking for injury. Over the top of their heads, I can see an arm frantically waving in and out of view. Yep, moving weirdos broke into my neighbor's house. I see the woman is standing still, her head still slumped to the side, just as she's been lowered into a police car. I was later told that as I spoke to my neighbors out their bedroom window, their dad had gone to fight the intruders and kicked the woman down the stairs as she was climbing them. The man was the frantically moving shadow I had seen from the doorway. Police reckon that they had been trying doors down our street and found one unlocked. I told them about the couple trying our door earlier in the afternoon. I'm guided to the ambulance and sit on the bed while the paramedics tend to a large cut on the back of my head from my fall. I vaguely feel them removing gravel, cleaning, gluing, and dressing it, but I'm preoccupied watching 2 police try to contain the human dancing inflatable man. They can't catch both arms at the same time to cuff him, so eventually, one policeman is cuffed to one of the man's hands and thus has his arm flung every which way as the man continues to move. I have no idea what they've been tried with, if they were on drugs or had a movement disorder. My dad and I do have a small bet on this matter, or when the court hearing is yet, but as a key witness, I'll be told when they need me in court. But I would happily go the rest of my life without hearing a kid scream at 2 a.m. and seeing those 2 weird moving creeps. So, creepy dancing dude and dudette, that's not me. When I was in grade school, my family lived in a house that sat directly across from the school I attended. However, there was about a half a mile of wooded area between them. I was allowed to walk to and from school because it was so straightforward. My mom informed me that she and her siblings walked through the woods to school when they were younger, so it felt like a natural and safe thing for her. I loved the excitement of being able to walk to school all on my own, and I felt pretty at home in the woods, as I had been raised around them. The walk was pretty direct, with very few issues aside from a small but wide creek that I had to cross. The creek itself was no problem. It was the fact that on each side there was a steep bank that had to be scaled. It wasn't too terrible unless it had been raining. It had rained the day before, so my steps, which were normally loud, were fairly silent. This might have saved my life. It at least saved me from something terrible. When I reached the creek, I was in my own little world. I was thinking about a science project that we had to do at school and whether or not I was fully prepared for my part in it. I was doing the supernova section and wasn't feeling very ready to make a speech in front of everyone, explaining it. Anyways, I reached the creek and dropped down the first bank with a slightly wet thud. I crossed over the water and began looking for something to grab a hold of, to pull myself up with. There were usually roots sticking out to use. Before I could climb up the other side, I heard a noise, like people talking. I stopped and waited to see if I heard it again, and I did. I heard a couple of boys talking, getting closer to me. I I smashed myself up against the bank and listened for a minute. I don't know why, but something just told me to stay away, that something was wrong. The boys came so close, all the way to the edge of the creek bank, but they didn't jump down. If they had, they would have seen me in a flash. As luck would have it, there was an overhang that I was able to hide under. I listened as the boys talked. Yeah, she comes through here all the time. Should be coming around in just a minute. My heart sank. I was the only person that walked this trail to and from school, and they were in my direct path. That isn't to say that no one else was ever in the woods, but in all the time that I used this trail, I had never seen another person. To get to the woods from my house, I had to cross the road and walk through a small flat area with no trees, and from the school side, I had to walk through the school's football field. Anybody from either side could have seen me going in or out of the woods easily. I stood plastered to the wall of mud, waiting for them to catch me, but they walked around a little bit, smoked a few cigarettes, and started getting frustrated. Where the heck is she, man? Said she would be here, so where is she? Maybe she didn't go to school today. Anyways, we gotta go or we're gonna miss our bus. The high schoolers caught their bus to the high school to elementary school. This told me two things. One, they were obviously in high school, so much older than me. And two, they had some seriously bad intentions toward me. I heard them leaving, but I didn't dare move. I waited a good 30 minutes or so before I darted out of the creek bed and toward home. I'll never know exactly what those boys had planned to do to me that day, and I'm not sure I want to. In December 2018, my ex and I split up after 7 years in a relationship. I was new to the dating game, so I didn't want to jump into it. In February, I met a guy at the bar that we frequent. The second time I met him, we exchanged numbers. By the end of March, I was feeling pretty comfortable and invited him to a party at my house. He stayed after the party, and one thing led to another. Well, after it was all said and done, I had a weird vibe. He was too pushy, and it made me uncomfortable. So I asked him to leave. I planned to never speak to him again, that is, until he started to text me from random numbers. He would say things like, "Hope you have fun fishing," when I didn't post on any social media that I was fishing. "I hope the movie was good," when I hadn't posted anything online that I was at the movies. He would text me and ask where in the bar I was at different bars, when I had never told anyone or posted where we were going. We had no mutual friends, so he was following me. The final straw was when my friends took me to Washington, D.C. for my 25th birthday celebration. We bar hopped all over the city. Around 2:30 a.m., we came out of the last bar we were at and decided to get cookies across the street. As we were coming out of the cookie shop, guess who pops up? You guessed it. He does. He goes, "I hope such and such were fun. I wanted to say hi earlier, but since you haven't been replying to my messages, I didn't want to freak you out." Yeah, safe to say I was terrified now. My friend's husband thankfully stepped in and called him out and threatened to call the police. I changed my number and moved. Thankfully, I haven't heard from him since, so to the guy I mistakenly had my first ever one-night stand with, let's never meet again. Update. After all the comments saying that I should still contact the police, that he could still be stalking me, I decided that it was best to do that. I contacted my local police, and they advised me to contact the police where I lived previously. I did so, and I still live close enough that I went on Tuesday to file the paperwork for a restraining order. Thankfully, I know his full name and place of employment, so they will be able to locate him. I provided all the text messages and screenshots that I have, and now we wait for him to be served. It will be a temporary 15-day restraining order. It will be extended because our local courthouse docket is on a stacked schedule due to the virus, so once we've been given a court date, we will go. I was told by the sheriff that it shouldn't be an issue getting a judge to approve a restraining order for 2 years, with all the evidence that I have and the testimony from my friends who witnessed these events. Thank you for the advice. This happened to me a few years ago while I was still in college, but I've been watching a ton of those narrated true stories on YouTube, and I felt compelled to share my own experience. For some context, I'm Irish, and I was studying in the UK to get my bachelor's degree. I don't know how common this is elsewhere, but where I lived, it seemed to be more common enough that landlords renting to students privately would convert the front downstairs room into an extra bedroom. This is where my bedroom was for my first year. I didn't mind it too much, but it was a bit weird having the front door directly in my room. especially since for those who aren't familiar with terraced houses in the UK, there isn't a front garden usually, and we just had a small section separating the front door from the path outside. By now, I'd been living here for a few months and I could recognize the difference in the sound of somebody walking past on the path and the sound of someone stepping towards the front door. On the night that this happened, I was totally alone in the house as both my housemates were away from home for the weekend. This was a little bit unusual since neither of them usually went home except for special occasions, but I think it might have been Valentine's Day around that time or something similar. It was around 1 in the morning and I was lying in bed and on the phone with my boyfriend at the time as we were long distance. As we were talking, I could hear some footsteps outside and I immediately recognized that it was somebody right outside the door. I kept listening and I could hear them shuffling around a bit, and then they started fumbling with the door handle. That spooked me and I told my boyfriend that I was going to have a look out the window to see if I could spot whoever it was. I got up and part the curtains and quite literally pressed my face and hands against the window to get a look outside, since it was pitch black by now and the street lights had been turned off. It took a second then for me to realize what I was looking at, but whoever it was who was outside was doing the same exact thing I was, pressed up against the window and staring in at me inches away. I didn't scream. I just felt as if all the wind had been knocked out of me, as I remember feeling like somebody had just dunked me into a pool of ice water. Whoever it was looked to be male. Couldn't see his face properly, but I just remember he was wearing a hoodie. He ran when he saw me, and after trying to collect myself, I quickly told my boyfriend and then rang the police. I don't remember how long it took for them to get there, but there wasn't a whole lot they could do. I think they might have done a quick patrol of the area, but nothing ever came of it. It was absolutely one of the most terrifying things that's happened to me, and I can't figure out at all why he was trying to break in. At the time I had my light on, which would have been visible from the window even with the curtains drawn, so I figured I could rule out that he was a junkie or squatter looking for a place to crash. I don't know if maybe he'd been watching me and my housemates for a while, but seeing 3 girls living alone and thought maybe this would make an easy burglary, or worse. But I am thankful I didn't have any trouble again afterwards. I couldn't sleep for days after, and I remember staying up until early morning, just watching movies on my laptop to feel less alone until I eventually fell asleep from exhaustion, once it started to get light outside. Since I was here from Ireland, I didn't even have any family members close by who I could call for or go and stay with, and it was the most agonizingly long weekend of my life waiting for my housemates to come back. I definitely think I've developed a slight phobia now of looking out the window while it's still dark outside. Now, before you bite my head off, yes, I know I have posted this story before. My reason for reposting is that the story has since been archived, and I have sort of a massive update to it that I really wanted to add. This morning, I was going through a really old hard drive and discovered a folder. The folder was named Kearney. In it was proof to validate parts of the story. So then people can hopefully stop accusing me of having made it up. I apologize for the awful quality of the pictures because these were taken back in 2007 with my video camera stills feature. So, hi everyone. Lately, I've had some requests to finally share the whole story of the homeless man I accidentally took in as a tenant and the incidents that followed. I'm just saying in advance, this is kind of a long one, but every detail is relevant. And please note, although everything I have documented is factual, the case was never solved and has likely gone cold since this happened more than 10 years ago. Now, back in 2007, I found myself working as a bartender at a now closed pub in my hometown. Not a job I particularly liked, but it did pay the bills. At this time, they had hired a new kitchen manager that we simply knew as Kearney. He was a pleasant enough man, mostly keeping to himself, but always stayed late to help the barman do our closing duties, so we all liked him for that. New in town, Kearney had yet to find a place of permanent residence, and I had recently lost my tenants, so somebody suggested that he ask me. He was considerably older than the tenants I usually took in, but having had a streak of bad luck with tenants my own age, I thought an older man with a nice steady job may be a shift in the right direction, so I agreed. Kearney wasted no time and followed me home that very same night, but only he wasn't alone. Enter Lawrence, the boyfriend of Kearney. Honestly, I hadn't even realized he was gay to that point, but it was water off my back regardless. Looking back now, what really should have bothered me though was Lawrence's appearance. He looked like he had been sleeping on the street, rather appropriately as I would later find out. So Kearney moved in, and Lawrence was there a lot too. And it was easy to know when, due to his mobile ringtone sounding like the quacking of a duckling. Kearney had some habits that were rather noteworthy to this story. In particular, one, he basically never closed his bedroom door. No matter what he was doing in there, it was always open. And two, although he was a very heavy smoker, he never once smoked inside the house. So Kearney had been living there for about 2 weeks when I had come down with an awful case of pink eye. This being highly contagious, I was given leave of absence from my bartending job and therefore decided to go wait it out at my sister's for a few days. Apparently, I didn't mind giving it to her. Sorry, sis. So the day my sister was scheduled to come pick me up, no, I couldn't drive yet. I took a casual stroll into the bar that Ben, my good friend from high school and at the time coworker, and I had been building into my house, and something caught my eye. All of our liquor bottles were completely empty. Now, those who had been frequenting my house at that time would know that we weren't just talking about 1 or 2 bottles of brandy here and there, but bottles of whiskey, gin, vodka, all kinds of stuff. Basically, it was a fully stocked bar that could host a pretty big party without requiring much in the way of additions. So I called Kearney in and asked him what he knew about this, receiving feedback that Lawrence and he had been on a slight drinking binge. Those were the actual words that he used, and it left me both furious about the thousands of worth of stock they had drunk out, but also slightly impressed that he was actually still alive. Regardless, I said that I would be dealing with this upon my return. So I'm with my sister for a few days, and on Friday I get a call from my local police department asking me if I know a Conrad Schultz. Ironically enough, I didn't. They finally add that I will probably know him as Kearney and that I should probably come down to the station, as they had just arrested his boyfriend trying to sell my camera equipment. So my sister rushes me back home, where all of my camera equipment was on display at the police station. It's on this visit that I'm informed that Lawrence was actually a Navy SEAL who got dishonorably discharged before turning to a life of crime and now has a rap sheet longer than the length of a chapter book. The kicker was that both he and Kearney were actually homeless men who had met at the Salvation Army. So Lawrence is in jail and my sister drops me off at home, more or less the same time that Kearney gets home as well. Based on Kearney's account of what happened, he had turned Lawrence in himself, so he couldn't allow Lawrence to do to me what he was trying to do, I guess. Although I had appreciated his sacrifice, I still told Kearney that he would have to go, having been the overall cause of all of this. However, not wanting to leave the homeless man while homeless, I gave him until the end of the month to make other arrangements. So Monday comes, and having just completed a staff meeting, I walk home to encounter a very much free Lawrence sitting on the sidewalk across from my house, watching it. I confront Lawrence as to why he's there, and he tries to apologize before begging for money. Rather out of character, really. I dismiss him without giving him a cent. Now I go back to the previous night. See, I had mentioned the staff meeting for a reason, as it was at that meeting where we had gotten a rather sizable list of liquor bottles that had gone missing from the storeroom, leaving us all suspecting each other. I, however, would not have to wait long to figure out who the real culprit was, as a few days later I opened the garage bin in my kitchen to see the missing bottles, all empty and staring back at me. I decided to sit on this information for the time being, although I did photograph it, just in case I needed it as evidence later. I had also called over Ben to inform him of the developments. As this was quickly becoming a detective game, we decided to enter Kearney's room to search for further evidence. Nothing of vast significance in there, with one exception: 2 single photographs of Lawrence. Before he had turned into a homeless version of Lex Luthor or Charles Xavier. Actually, there were several of Lawrence's things still there, but as Lawrence had spent a lot of time there before the incident, I accepted this as normal. Now, I should also add that I had mentioned Lawrence's release to Kearney and had told him that if I even suspected that they were still seeing each other, I would throw him out of the house myself. Only a few days would pass before this came into play. On this particular night, I had been bartending again, and Kearney had constantly been stopping by the bar to help himself to drop glasses half full of wine and half full of Coke, which he would go drink outside the restaurant. We confronted him about this, but as he correctly pointed out, he was still a manager and we had no right to tell him what he could or could not do. On his 4th trip, however, I had grown suspicious and decided to follow him outside, where I encountered Lawrence sitting outside, sharing the half Coke / half wine concoctions with Kearney. This made me mad, so the next day I returned to the restaurant with my photographic evidence, which I handed over to the general manager, who was also kind of a friend of mine. Although I hadn't physically seen it, I had heard the confrontation through the office door when he fired Kearney. Kearney left, obviously upset, and apparently had no idea that I had been the one who had turned him in. So we had closed earlier that night and I was walking home, going past the high school. I saw Kearney coming from the opposite direction. He walked past me, literally only saying 2 words. "I'm scared," before disappearing into the darkness. That would be the last time that I would ever physically lay my eyes on Conrad Schultz. So we reached the final week before Kearney's eviction was to take place. Ben had come to stay with me for that duration as we both wanted to monitor the situation and make sure that nothing else happened. It was in this week that Kearney's behavior suddenly changed. He was constantly smoking in his room and his door was closed 24/7. In fact, neither Ben nor I had caught so much as a glimpse of him in that entire last week, which we hadn't thought much of at that time. So, the day of Kearney's eviction comes around. Ben has gone home for a few hours and I finally hear Kearney's bedroom door open. Somebody walks out of the room, opens the front door and leaves. Followed him outside, but somehow he had already completely disappeared. What was left though was his house keys, indicating that he obviously wasn't planning to come back. I took a look at the keys, noticing something strange. Although the correct keys were all in the keychain, there were also several that weren't mine. Why would he leave me the wrong keys? I remember thinking as I walked into his room. His room was a shock, not because of the state it was in. The 2 had broken his bed in an act of wild monkey sex, but I had known about that already. As I said, he never closed his damn door, but more that he had literally left almost all of his belongings behind with one exception. You guessed it. The 2 photos of Lawrence. Upon further investigation, I suddenly realized that all traces of Lawrence ever being there had completely vanished, with all of Kearney's stuff left behind. There was one thing Lawrence left behind though, his duckling ringtone, which it turned out hadn't been so much a ringtone as an actual duckling, which now strolled around casually in the vacant bedroom, and we named him Neville, by the way. So Ben returns and gets updated about the developments, both of us thinking the way he left was rather weird. Of course, the whole thing had been weird. It was only when I asked the infamous question that all of this became a conspiracy theory. Did you ever actually see Kearney in this last week? It was to our shock that we realized that neither of us had. Suddenly putting puzzle pieces together. The changing habits, Neville the duck, the wrong keys, only Lawrence's stuff being gone. It was to great discomfort that we both asked the question, who had really been living in our house this last week? During the next few days, Ben and I went on a mission, searching the town, crawling into drain pipes, trying to find any trace of Kearney's whereabouts, but they all added up to nothing. Conrad Schultz had simply vanished off the face of the earth. That wasn't the case with Lawrence though. No, he was still around, having made some new homeless friends. We encountered him several times begging on the streets. I asked him every time, "Where's Kearney, Lawrence?" But he just acted like he had never heard of him. The last time I would see Lawrence was across from work, attempting to break into a car. I had called the police on him and they had arrived rather quickly, arresting him on the spot. While he was being led away by the police, I shouted after him one last time, "Where is Kearney, Lawrence?" But he just ignored me and let the cops drag him away. The next day, I filed a police report, reporting Kearney as a missing person and suggesting that Lawrence may know something about it, but nothing ever came of it. So, Lawrence, I don't know if you did something to Kearney or not, but if you did, let's not meet again. Hey Reddit, I'm a long-time user, but due to the nature of this situation, I decided to use a throwaway. Trigger warning for baby death, abuse, stalking, etc. Also, apologies if this isn't the right sub, we just need answers. My girlfriend's mother is a long-time heroin user and has been in and out of jail for my girlfriend's whole life. When she lived with her mother and her mother's husband, she witnessed physical abuse and drug activity. She was forced to move out at a very young age in order to stay alive. She thought her mother was finally clean when her mom announced her pregnancy. After getting over the initial shock, my girlfriend then decided to be supportive of her mom since she thought she was clean. That was until her mom overdosed while pregnant. She decided to cut all contact at that point. My girlfriend is also a mandated reporter and last year reported her mom and her mom's husband to the state since she knew it wasn't a safe situation for the baby. The baby died in their house not even a month after due to an overdose with signs of physical abuse. My girlfriend's mother was arrested for the murder of her baby and other charges. Her husband was arrested for child endangerment and other charges very recently. At first, the judge did not grant either of them bail. Eventually, her husband was granted bail, which he posted. We did not know this until recently, which helped us put some of the pieces together. My girlfriend and I like to sit outside of her house in the car and just chat or listen to music. Recently, there have been black cars around my girlfriend's house. She is also frequently being followed by black cars when she drives me home. It's the same couple of black cars that do this. They're not just random ones. At first, we thought we were just paranoid since everybody was still in jail, but when we found out that the husband was out of jail, we began to doubt our insanity. The first major thing happened after my girlfriend and I went on a dinner date. Got home after dark and sat in her car for about 45 minutes before we noticed the same black car passing by us every few minutes. After 10 minutes of that, a different car drove towards us, flicking its high beams on when it got close enough for us to see who was inside. It swerved into the oncoming lane, and I genuinely thought I was going to hit the passenger side of the car. It sped away, and we ran inside. After that, we started noticing the black cars more and more. This past Wednesday morning, around 3 a.m.-ish, the same distinct black van that we had been seeing pulled up outside my house. This was weird because my girlfriend and I live about 30 minutes from each other in two separate cities. A man got out of the van and shined a flashlight through my yard, scanning it almost entirely. He shined the flashlight up at the window I was sitting at, kept it there for a second, then walked 30 feet to an empty driveway, scanning around there for 20 seconds before getting in the van and peeling away. The windows were ice covered and frozen, so I couldn't make out the specifics of the van, but it was strange. A few nights later, my girlfriend and I spent some time hanging out in the car when we spotted a black van hiding behind another parked car further up the street. We could only see one headlight, but it creeped by us as we sat in the car. My girlfriend lives between two dead-end streets. Think of a very blocky U, and she lives in the middle of that. The van went up the first dead end, four-way on, and sat for a few minutes before turning around and driving almost into another lane of traffic to get close to us. It then went up the other dead end and stayed put. We thought it was weird that the van didn't just back out of the first dead end, instead opting to drive all the way up the narrow street and turn around. After a few minutes, we call a friend and recount this story just to get an extra opinion. While my girlfriend was talking to her friend, I got out of the car to go for a cigarette and to see how far away the van was. I walked up the dead end that the van was on for about 15 feet before getting the worst gut feeling I've ever gotten. Across the street from me was a black mass, which was darker than the darkness around it. I decided to just turn around and rush my girlfriend into the house. Later that night, we heard a bang coming from downstairs, followed by what sounded like a boot on wooden stairs. We locked the bedroom door, and I sat against the door with a baseball bat, hoping to barricade it. A few minutes later, we heard a car door slam before the sound of tires squeezing and a car driving away. Our initial idea was maybe it came from the TV, but we had paused it, and the TV in the next room is never loud enough to feel real. When I went downstairs an hour later to get water, there was nothing damaged or missing. We theorized that maybe it was the sound of the front door trying to be opened, even though it was dead bolted. My girlfriend's exterior wall doesn't face the road, and we've never heard car sounds before. It is, however, next to a private driveway, and sometimes we'll hear her grandparents' car door close, or the neighbors backing out. The next day, I was shoveling the sidewalks at my girlfriend's house, an activity that took about 20 minutes, and I saw the same black Chevy Silverado with mud streaks on the tailgate. It circled the block about 4 times. I was able to see the silhouette of the man driving through the passenger side window, and each time it was the same man and same truck. My girlfriend lives in a small town, and we were able to catalog the neighborhood cars. The black van and truck are abnormal. Our theory is that somebody is trying to scare my girlfriend into not testifying, or flat out making sure neither of us have the ability to testify. We really just need some more opinions. Are we just paranoid, or is this something we should actually be worried about? Do you think these are just weird coincidences?